Okay, we are live. Day 364 today. Lots of reps, but we're staying consistent together, everybody. So today we're looking at the Birmingham market. We're going a little bit out west of the market here. Let me make sure the audio is working, actually. Yes, looks like we're in business. So as we move out to the west side, we see this property. It looks relatively turnkey. And just based on my experience so far, the $240,000, that's really hard to achieve a cash-on-cash return yield. Obviously, it's not investment advice. We're not soliciting any investments on this call, but let's go through the exercise and understand what price or set of terms might make this property a deal, quote unquote. And this property looks pretty nice. I mean, inside looks relatively renovated with the ceiling lights and everything. I mean, if this property sells for $240, it's really great to know what the valuation is for this property as we think about, okay, how do I want to renovate my future properties? Now that I see this property out in, where is this area? This is across the interstate, the I-20, Ensley area. Okay. Now that we're in this area, let's go ahead and get our data points. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the county, because that's going to allow us to look up the FMR or the ceiling rents on HUD's website. Now this property is in Jefferson County. Jefferson County. So you can find that and go and Google HUD FMR. HUD FMR, FMR stands for fair market rents. And you're going to click on the full link up top. Once you get there, you want to go down to the bottom left, click access to small area FMRs, look up FY 2025 small area FMRs, click on the state, click on the county, and now you're going to get by bedroom count, by zip code, what your rent ceiling is for 35218. And in 35218, you're going to see that the rent ceiling for a 4-bed is 1580, and your 3-bed is 1420. So that's just a little bit lower than the example we saw yesterday. And again, I'm writing down all these numbers because my partners already know how to analyze these deals. So this is a pretty fast way for them to understand where all these data points come from. Now, just because I got the 1580 does not mean that is the rent that you can use to underwrite the deal. Underwrite is also another way we say analyze, right? So when you get 1580, you need to compare it against the market rent because of a test called the rent reasonableness test. And I'm going to get to what that is in just a second. If you go to the rent reasonableness test, if you go to affordablehousing.com, you go to the owner section, you go to the market rent estimator, you plug in your address, you plug in your bedroom count. Now all of a sudden you're going to see that the average rent for 25 units within a 2.29 mile radius, the average rent is $13.38. $13.95 for the zip, $13.61 for the city, and $19.24. Now, the rent I'm going to use to underwrite this deal is I'm going to compare the lower of the two, so this $13.38 against the $15.80. One is because the $15.80 also includes utility. So if you don't provide utilities to your tenant, you have to back out the utility allowances by home, by asset type, so single family home versus apartment, by utility. So if you don't provide electric, you don't provide water, you don't provide trash, etc., you have to back that out. So because this is the lower the rent, I have to use $13.38 because of the rent reasonableness test. So I'm going to write in $13.38 for my rental assumption in B16. And I'm going to pull up the rent reasonableness test for you all to read through. So this is the Housing Choice Voucher Program guidebook that I'm loading right now. Housing Choice Voucher used to be called Section 8 vouchers because of all the negative connotations associated with Section 8. They rebranded that to Housing Choice Vouchers. In its guidebook in Section 2.2, you can see that in conducting rent reasonableness, the PHA, or the Public Housing Authority, must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent to other comparable unassisted units. So this means that you can't charge more rent simply because they are a voucher holder. Now, obviously, the unit type matters, right? But when I see that these are 25 units that are 4 bedrooms within a 2.29 mile radius, chances are it's very unlikely that these are 4-bedroom apartments, right? It's probably comparing against 4-bedroom single family homes only. And that's really because, well, guess what? People don't really build 4-bedroom apartments. So that's why I have that confidence. If this was a 3-bedroom count, you would probably just want to double check the vicinity to make sure you're comparing apples to apples and making sure that you are only pulling in the rents for 3-bedroom single family homes if that's what you're analyzing. All right. So now that we talked about 1338, right? We got 239,900 for the listing price. For a rehab calculator, what I'm going to do is I got $1,500 in row 6 set aside for the roof repair. I got $500 in row 46 for some landscaping, just to kind of keep the place a little tidier. And I got 2 toilets that I like to replace with high pressure flush toilets, simply because I have not had any clogged toilet calls yet, because I use those high pressure flush toilets. If you think about it, if you ever get a clogged toilet call, it'll probably cost you, let's call it $200, $250 just to get a plumber out there and declog it for you. So I'd rather get ahead of it, and I don't want to do it. So now that it becomes 3,500, I got to come back to B6. And before, it was multiplied by 3 at the every end of this formula. So I got to delete that. And now my total rehab is just about $3,500, which makes sense because this property is relatively turnkey. I'm just having some money set aside just in case there are some things that need to get touched up before someone moves in. All right. So now that I got these numbers in here, 1338, I'm going to get my rest of my numbers. So what's my property tax number? For my property taxes, it says $42 right here. So I'm putting 42. That seems a little low, but we'll just make sure you follow up with your county assessor records to make sure that that is accurate. And for my insurance, I'm going to do equals 186, which I got from the Redfin website. And I'm going to multiply that by 1.2. The reason I'm multiplying by 1.2 is because I am adding a 20% premium, hence why you multiply it by 1.2. And that's because I'm assuming that this 186 estimate is probably for a person that's living in the home as a primary residence, right? As your primary residence. So your insurance is going to be lower. When you're using it as an investment property, chances are it's going to be a little bit more expensive because they view investment properties, and they, as in are the insurance companies, they view investment properties as more risky, charging more premium. So that's why it's going to be $223. All right. You're adding 20% premium. Then in row B32, I'm putting aside 10% of my rents every single month for maintenance, CapEx, lawn care, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. But this is money that doesn't belong to you, even if you don't spend it that month. And you got to set aside this money because, well, I just got a roof bill. It was about $15,000 to replace a roof. I got a bill a couple weeks ago for $3,500 to replace the parts on our air conditioning units for $3,500. So if you don't set aside this money every single month to analyze the deal, you are grossly overestimating your profitability because you are underestimating your expenses. Don't be that person. Don't trust the people that says, "Oh, it's going to be turnkey. It's a relatively new house. You're not going to have any maintenance." Man, you got to put aside money every single month because that repair is coming for you no matter what, right? If you don't put aside $130 each month, like what we're doing here, and you get a $13,000 bill in 100 months from now, well, you're going to be thinking you made all this extra money for the last 100 months when in reality, you did not make any money at all. So don't be that person. All right. We got 10% set aside for property management expenses. So that's hiring a third-party management. You could probably self-manage if you like, but if you don't underwrite with property management, then you essentially have bought yourself another job, because if you don't have outside help, then you are the help. So set aside that money every single month just so that you can have an out in case you ever do decide to stop self-managing your properties. Then obviously you have 5% for vacancy, and now that is 400. All right, so now we're going to add in all these details now. So in F19, we have 25% down, and our down payment is going to be equals to B4, which is our listing price, multiplied by my down payment percentage, which is F19, and that's going to equals to roughly around 60 grand. I got 2.5% for my closing costs, and I got $3,500 for renovations that we kind of calculated earlier together. For my financing amount, in K6, I'm going to equals to my B4, my asking price, minus my down payment amount in E19, and that's going to equals to 180 grand. My interest rate is going to be 8%, and I'm going to put in start date of 9/1/2024 just to kind of keep it there. So now, what do we have? If I rent this property out as a 4-bedroom property for $1,338, I'll be negative cash flow $582 a month. That's a negative 10% return on your capital, and $239,900. And that's assuming our rehab number is $3,500 with 25% down, 8% interest rate. So obviously, $582, losing $582 a month is probably not a deal. So what we're gonna do is let's go ahead and find a price that would make this a deal, quote unquote, right? In order for it to be a deal, my personal criteria is that I want at least 10% return on my cash on cash because, well, you got to account for execution risk, right? Because if you're only like 5%, why don't you just go buy like a 10-year treasury yield or 30-year bond? It's like 3-4%. It's more risk free because there's execution risk. What if your contractor doesn't show up and do what they say they're going to do? What if the rehab goes longer? What if you find something behind the walls? These are all parts of execution risk, right? Think about it. So if you don't account for that to make sure it's worth your time and energy, you're going to end up burning out. So watch what happens to my cash and cash return number as I lower my asking price in B4. Let's say I lower it to 100 grand. Now all of a sudden it's 7.3. Let's go 95. Let's go 90. So the only way it will be a deal is if I buy this property for 90 grand, $90,000. And this is how I'm able to tell you why I raw deals really quick. If I see anything over 200 grand, I don't even analyze it anymore because I know it's going to be so far off from being able to cash flow as a 4-bedroom property in this area. This is a 10.3. Okay. That's assuming $35 rehab, 25% down. Now, let's say your interest rates go down to 7%. Now, all of a sudden, your cash and cash return went up to 12.3, right? Just when I adjusted our interest rates in K7 to 7%, it now popped up to 12.3. So as I go up my asking price, I can still achieve a similar return that I'm targeting. So 97, 98. Okay. So $98,000, it still would be a deal, quote unquote, even though I'm so far from the listing price. But now you're able to stay objective in how you analyze a deal and understand what numbers will make that deal work. $3,500, and now my down payment is 7%. So I'll do one more scenario, right? What if you start rehabbing the property and you open up the walls and you realize, oh, this is going to cost a lot of money because you found some mold? Or maybe you do a sewer scope and you realize that the sewer line is all out of whack and it needs to be replaced. Well, now all of a sudden your rehab tripled from $3,500 to, and I'm going to B6 and I'm multiplying the original number by 3 but in the formula, and now it's 10,400. Well, now even with the 7% interest rate in your scenario, you're at an 8% interest, 8% cash on cash return. So now you can no longer again to pay 90 grand. It might be $90,000 now. So you see how that seesaw just happened, right? 10,400, 25%, 7%. At 1338, I'd be cash flowing $289 a month right now, and this would be a 9.9% return. So think about all the scenarios that we went through. First, we said, well, at 240 grand, it's not a deal. So I lowered it to 90 grand. Then I said, well, what if interest rates go down by a full point to 7%? Because some of your biggest moves in interest rates have already happened. For the past 2-3 years, our spreads between the 10-year treasury bond yield went almost as high as 3%. Historically, it's usually only between 1.5 to 2%. So you almost got a full point lower just simply because of the spread narrowing to getting back to historical averages. And then you also have the Fed now also decreasing interest rates. So some of your biggest interest rate moves have already happened. In order for there to be another big leg move lower for interest rates, you probably have to have a bigger deterioration in the job market, which we're hopefully not going to see. So if you're on the sidelines and you're waiting to purchase, well, the interest rates already moved one big leg lower. What might you be waiting for? Just do your research. Obviously, not investment advice. Do your research and understand how do mortgage rates correlate with the 10-year yield. It's not necessarily waiting for the Federal Reserve to cut rates. Don't be that person and not understand how interest rates really work in correlation to what the Fed does, what the 10-year yield does, and what the Fed sentiment is that ultimately affects how the bond market moves. All right. So we went through all these exercises just so we can figure out and understand, well, what if my renovation tripled, right? We went from 240 to 90 grand to make it a deal. Then interest rates dropped down, so $98,000 of work. But then our rehab tripled, so now our willingness to pay again goes back down to 90 grand. And that's how you stay objective so that you don't get burned out, you don't get scared, you don't get frustrated when you get your inspection report back and say, oh, it's going to cost this much money. Stay objective. Learn how to understand the numbers so that you figure out what is quote unquote a deal, right? Some people in the world might just want to be break even on their cash flow, especially in an area where they think they're going to grow 5% every single year. Let's say it's $1 million property. They might not care about $300 a month of cash flow. Now, when the property is going by 50 grand, right? So obviously that's very speculative. It's especially if you're betting on appreciation, is very, really, really risky. So be aware of how you analyze these deals. And that's it for today. If you guys want to copy the spreadsheet, you guys can go to affordablehousing.io, not .com, affordablehousing.io. Click on the name, email, and phone number. And that's the fastest way to get a copy of the spreadsheet. I didn't make the spreadsheet from scratch. I got it from a few other folks. I modified it. I tweaked it. I put in my own scenarios so I can analyze these deals a lot faster. And that is how you put in the reps every single day to get better. And my hope is that you analyze the same deal I analyzed today, right? This has been on Redfin for one day using the same spreadsheet. And then my goal is that you put it on your own YouTube channel so that you can track your own progress and feel confident that you know what you're doing. Because if a partner ever asks you, hey, why do you think this is a deal? Well, you can say, I know this is a deal because I've been looking at deals for the past 364 days in a row. Might that give you more confidence that you know what you're doing? Might that give them more confidence that you know what you're doing? Again, we're not soliciting any investments, not investment advice. I just hope that you all are putting in the reps together because this is how high tides lift all boats. All right. I will see you all tomorrow for day 365. A full year of going live every single day in a row. No excuses, everybody. Let's keep doing it together. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 365.